Welcome to freedomlovin.com, where we focus on building freedom in an unfree world. Through personal development, location independence, and passive income strategies. Now here's your host, Kevin Koskela.
Welcome to another episode of the Freedom Lovin' Podcast. This is Kevin, and this is number 73. And just a minute, I have an interview with my friend Chris Stefanick of the Choice Conversations podcast. And it was a great chat. We talked about a lot of really deep stuff, and we got into some deep psychology and really cool stuff. So that has a lot to do with freedom in your own life and creating freedom in an unfree world. So stay tuned for that. The only bummer about that chat was that I had to leave and we had to cut it short, even though it's not a short interview. We could have talked about a lot more stuff, and I'll definitely have him back on at some point again, and we'll have another chat. So stay tuned for that for just a minute. And I do have a new iTunes review. Wanted to read that off. And this one is from, the name is Past the Test, and it's 5 stars by Average Radical. Awesome name. The test of a podcast is if you download a bunch of episodes, go on a long drive, and you get home and time flew by. Kevin's podcast passed the test. That's awesome. Yeah, I do that quite often, either a drive or on a flight or something like that. So I appreciate that review. And if anyone else wants to help out, I'd love to hear from you on iTunes, and just give us a quick rating and review, and I'll read it on the next show. So just really quickly where I'm at. So I actually moved back to the beach for a couple weeks, and I took an Airbnb place, and I really put the minimalism thing to a test, because I moved out of my place just for 2 weeks, and then I'm going to be I'm going to be going up to the Bay Area to visit family, and then I'm going to be flying over to Prague, and I'll start the European adventure for about a month. So minimalism is awesome. I've been able to pare down quite a bit more, even from last time, and it was not a problem to move. I had very few issues, just had a couple boxes, and actually I'm down to 3 boxes and clothes. And so, and then I have a bike, but the bike kind of stays in San Diego, and it doesn't get moved very much, but I had to move it this time, so I just took 2 trips and got the bike, and yeah, it's all good. So loving living at the beach again. It's just so nice. Actually, the weather hasn't been amazing, but yesterday and today is actually really kind of typical San Diego, light breeze, 73 degrees, sunny. So yeah, it's really awesome. But I realized today that I really need to get out of here, and it's paradise to a certain point, but it's also, I feel kind of stagnant here. I feel like I need just a change in scenery, and it's nice that I'm going somewhere that I've been to before, but I'm not very familiar with it. And then I'm going to be off traveling all around Eastern Europe, so I've never been to any of those places. So I think just the change of venue, the change of scenery it can do so much for your mindset, and that's what I'm hoping for here in the next month as I go into this kind of travel phase. But the first 2 weeks when I'm in Europe, I'm definitely going to be working. I don't plan on doing a lot of sightseeing, because I've seen Prague before, but I'll definitely be out and about and walking around the beautiful city that it is. And but 2 weeks of that, and then we'll be a little more on the tourist side. So we'll definitely keep some podcasts coming from Eastern Europe, and I look forward to that. One more thing before we get onto the interview. If you are like me and you are interested in reading a lot of business books, but you really don't have time, I'd really appreciate it if you could check out my site. It's called 100mustreads.com, and we offer audio summaries of business books as well as PDF summaries of some of the top business books. And I've kind of, in the past couple months, I've kind of let that site go, actually a few months. I've let that site go a little bit, but we're getting back to it. We're going to be adding a new business book every month, at least one new business book every month, and we'll have a PDF of that and an audio summary. So the audio summaries can be about an hour, hour and a half, whereas if you listen to the entire book, that'll be about 8 hours, sometimes even longer. Some of the books I'm listening to now are like 15, 16 hours. So this is boiled down to just the essentials. And so this is a site that I really believe in. I think it's a great product, and I'm going to be focusing more attention on that in the coming months. And so you'll see some new books and also some more classic books added. So check it out. It's 100mustreads.com. It would really help this show and as well as your business education. So that's about all I had today. I hope you're really enjoying the summer if it's summer for you. Without further ado, here's my interview with Chris Stefanick. Go out there and build some freedom, and we'll talk to you soon. All right. Well, I'm super excited to have my friend and Choice Conversations podcast host, Chris Stefanick, on the show today. Hey, Chris. How's it going?
It's going great, Kevin. How about you?
Pretty fantastic. I just moved apartments to the beach. I was living downtown, and now I'm at the beach. And yeah, I'm just really happy with it. It's really nice in July in San Diego. It's like perfect weather and all that. So, yeah.
Wow, that sounds great. Fantastic. Yeah, I just recently moved too, and I'm now basically at a lake. I'm about 5 minutes from my house, 5 minutes walking, that is. I could be on a nature trail in about 8 to 10 minutes out. I'm on the lake. So
that's so awesome.
Yeah, I'm pretty thrilled with that. I like to walk the dog every day. And so I majorly upgraded my scenery for walking, my daily walks. So
nice.
I'm pretty jazzed.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was so impressed with North Carolina, especially where we met there in Chapel Hill. I just thought it was just such an awesome area. And of course, I hit it probably when the weather was pretty ideal.
Yeah, it's hot now. It's not quite ideal right now, but you do get used to it though. I mean, people always say that, but I've really found it to be true. I moved here from Ohio, and the first summer was brutal. And then since then, it's like, if it's 100 degrees, okay, maybe I'm not looking to do hard labor, or maybe looking for shade, but it doesn't stop me from going out. I still enjoy going outside. I still enjoy the outdoors through the hottest parts of the summer.
I can totally relate. I tend to adjust to the hot weather pretty quickly, and suddenly it's like 90 degrees feels cool, and it's like even 100 degrees with a slight breeze, it's like, oh, it's a nice day.
Yeah. I mean, I just try to not be in the full sun, if I can get in the shade, and there's a lot of nature areas where you can be in the shade, or get out early, so to make sure I get that dog walk in early in the day. Or now that we live so close to a lake, I've been going out kayaking with my family every weekend, and just making sure that happens, as early as possible. It's the best way to do it.
But. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I wanted to kind of get a little of your background for people that don't know you. And I'm especially curious about like where you grew up, and then what was your path to the philosophy that you have now and the career, and then also your podcast.
My upbringing, I grew up in Ohio and was in went to Catholic schools and went to church every Sunday, and, had just an extraordinary amount of religion shoved down my throat pretty much. It's like every day, I was in Catholic schools for 12 years, and it wasn't until I think the first 9 years, maybe the first 10 years, I had religion class for an hour every day. And I think I'm like, man, what an extraordinary waste of time. I'm like, wow, that is so many hours that could have been spent doing other things. So there was that. And I think my upbringing was pretty typical for a lot of people. My parents were like the authoritarian style. Mm-hmm. And I was really... sports were like a really big deal in my family and in Ohio in general. People like sports fans are crazy in Ohio. And I've known several people who have now that I'm in the South that have gone to Ohio for a while and come back, and they're like, man, I thought they were crazy down here in Ohio. It's wild. It's just like, it's so important. And like, if your team wins, it's like so great. And if they lose, it's like the end of the world. And I'm like, it really wasn't until later in life that I realized how just silly that was, that my enjoyment should rest on the, whether or not an 18-year-old is able to hold on to a football or not, And it's like,
exactly.
Why is this ruining my day,
Yeah. It is when people say it's like a religion. It really is like a religion. It's and it's the same in parts of Texas where football is just everything.
Oh yeah. So, I came out of that and was still like, I spent just an extraordinary amount of time on sports. That was like one of my big things, either watching sports or doing like fantasy football and things like that, and just wasting tons of time. I mean, I did enjoy it. I don't want to say it was a complete waste, and I've now like dramatically cut back on my sports use because I find this. I'm like, yeah, it's entertainment and I enjoy it, but there's a lot of things I enjoy, and there's a lot of forms of entertainment out of there, and there's a lot of things I enjoy that may not technically be classified as entertainment, but I still enjoy them. Like just exercising, I find there are certain activities that I really enjoy, like walking in nature with my dog. I really enjoy it. Kayaking, I really enjoy it. I don't know that that's technically classified as entertainment, but it brings me joy, and then it fulfills some other areas, some other needs I have in my life. So, but I mean, I guess the awareness to coming around to that boy, I'm spending all this time on football and other sports. I mean, it wasn't just football. That was just the number one. That all kind of, the dissatisfaction I had with my life was really brought around by the Great Recession, by the crash in 2008. So I was sitting there, and had put a lot of money into retirement. I was like, maxing out my contributions to my IRAs and the like. And I'm sitting there, I'm just watching this money that I could have been spending on other things, right? I'm deferring a lot of my gratification till later, doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? And just to watch it like just melting away. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here, And so that kind of got me down the road of watching the financial markets and learning about like just like the corruption and in the banking industry, naturally led into like the corruption in government, and got me looking at, I mean, like somewhere along the way, somebody sent me a link to like Stefan Molyneux, Statism is Dead.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's like one of his most popular videos,
Yep.
And I watched it and I'm like, holy shit. And so that, I wasn't like won over immediately. Okay, time to, get my anarchist card. And
Right.
it opened me up to, okay, let's just keep looking at what all's out there, and then, kind of discovered the liberty movement and along the way. And, credit to Molyneux is he's really big on self-knowledge and therapy and things like that. And just really discovered that the dissatisfaction I had in my life, one, I wasn't just, I really wasn't paying attention to what was going on with my money. I was just putting that in these funds and just, like the, whatever it is, the 70% stocks and 30% bonds or whatever it is, and was just kind of trusting other people with my money. But it really opened me up the self-awareness thing that there's a lot of unhappiness that I have, a lot of that's not being fulfilled, that right now, rather than kind of facing that, and because it's painful to face the trauma that I had experienced growing up and the areas where I wasn't happy, it was easier to just say, okay, rather than deal with that, I'm going to turn on football.
Yep.
This thing that doesn't matter at all, and I'm going to put my focus there. And I learned later that's called dissociation. There's many ways to dissociate. People are addicted to sports. They're addicted to their work. They're addicted to sex or drugs. Or there's basically, the more I did research and looked around, I was like, oh my God, like our culture is just all about addiction. It's just some of these addictions are socially acceptable and some of them are not,
Totally.
But they're all a problem. They're saying, you know what? You're not happy with who you are. You're not happy in your own skin and knowing yourself. So you've got to distract yourself from that, and find some way to not look at that pain that you suffered, and it's, I think religion is one part of a whole system that's all revolving around that. It like starts at the family level, and the family is a system where, kids are essentially, they're brought up in environments that are not meeting their needs. They're not very nurturing, and they get traumatized. I guess that sounds really dramatic or whatever, over the top, but it is an accurate description. Not all children are traumatized to the same degree as others. There are degrees of trauma, right? There's degrees of health, but in general, you are hard pressed to find children growing up in this culture in the West where they're not having several of their needs not met, which is causing, various degrees of trauma with them. And then their culture is just designed to distract you away from that, because part of it is you don't want to blame your parents, question that and blame them, so that, like I mentioned, religion, there is, there's several pieces in religion. Well, I guess the 10 Commandments, honor thy father and mother right there is pretty high up on there. There's not like honor thy son and daughter,
right?
It's
exactly.
Like,
well, because they're to be controlled, right? You have to control these little people.
Right. Exactly. So, I just started listening to lots of podcasts, reading lots of books, and a lot of it was in the liberty movement. A lot of it was in investing and things like that, and found out that I really loved investing and handling my own money, and that I was a hell of a lot better at it than like just putting my money in a mutual fund. If I learned what to do,
Right.
and learned what worked for me, learned the style that fit my personality, because there's a lot of different ways to make money in the markets, or not even just, just real estate is, another financial market that has a lot of pros to it. It's a way that a lot of people make a killing in it. But just looking around and, I researched that and decided real estate, while there was some serious advantages to it, was not something that really fit what I wanted to do, and played around with different strategies with stocks and commodities and like that and found what worked for me. And so, just kept educating myself, reading lots of books, and somewhere along the way I ended up as a podcaster, and that's really opened up a lot of avenues to me, really helped me to meet a lot of great, really interesting, intelligent people who have just helped to keep that education process going and stimulate my brain and my desire to learn more. That's pretty much it. I mean, I know I was kind of all over the place in that, but it's been a journey of, a lot of it is just, it's personal growth and learning about myself and that self-knowledge and finding better ways to be happy, finding more effective strategies for being happy and finding peace in my life,
Yeah. That's really interesting. You and I kind of are about the same time. We kind of discovered a lot of this stuff, the self-knowledge and everything. And I was the same. I was exactly the same. I mean, I was a huge sports fan as well. And I spent a lot of time on that. I also did fantasy football, and I actually did something that's even you want to have more of a time suck than fantasy football, try fantasy baseball.
Right. It's 162 games a year or whatever.
Yeah, and depending on the type of league it is, you could have a situation where you're constantly having to make changes to your roster, which means like adding people from the disabled list, trading, like there's always moves to be made. And so rather than once a week sitting down and going through all your stats and your players, you have to do it every day. So it was a complete obsession. And I think I did that for off and on for maybe 8 to 10 years. And yeah, I mean, it is, you look back on that and it's like, that's a pretty good waste of time. And it was all just, kind of a distraction. And not to say that I don't enjoy sports at all now. And I'm not one of those people that thinks that it's all lame or something, but I don't care. Like you said, I think you made a good point about like living and dying with this team. There's nothing related to what your life is. And yet it's like, even like Molyneux had a podcast on this, which it was so good, but it would ruin anyone that likes to watch pro sports. It would just ruin their desire to do it anymore, because he laid out like what exactly it is. And it's like, he was supposed to be rooting for his home team somewhere in England, and it was like the soccer team. And he's like, all the guys on the team were from like Africa. And he's like, that didn't make any sense to me. Like, why would I be rooting for these guys just because they happen to be playing right here? It's like, yeah. So it just comes down to distracting, and it fits right in with all the other things that we're distracted with, including just like TV. Like, you turn on the TV, or you walk into a bank or someplace where they have a TV on with the news blasting, and it's like the same, few stories over and over, and everything is an emergency, and you have to know it. The political scene is just like, you could be caught up in what the politicians are doing or saying, or what the latest is, just constantly. And it's this, you can just live in that world, and it's exactly like professional sports or religion or anything else. So.
Oh yeah. And I mean, I streamlined that story. So in the beginning, I was being drawn into politics, and there was Ron Paul, and there was even I even was a volunteer on the campaign for B.J. Lawson, who was basically like North Carolina's version of Ron Paul. He would have been awesome to get elected. He really would have. But I mean, the only thing that would have changed from that is you might have like educated a few more people. Yeah. So it's like, if that's my goal, there are other ways that I can educate people, like my own podcast,
Yeah.
And that are much more fulfilling to me and to others, and don't keep you locked into that paradigm of the, the ballot box and, systems of violence and all of that. So systems of coercion.
Right. So I wanted to ask you, so over the last 7, 8 years or so, you've been able to kind of dig in and get all this self-knowledge and kind of bring in more happiness into your life. What do you think are the keys to that? Like, where do you start? We talked about kind of what triggered it for you, but where do you start with it? And do you start reading books? Do you go to therapy? Do you listen to podcasts? Or
Yeah, that's really, really hard. The problem is, I mean, you really need to start with self-knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is, once you start going down the path of self-knowledge, if you're coming from the area of dissociation, the next step after that is depression. So I had Daniel Mackler on my show, and he has a great video on it where he outlines the 4 stages of enlightenment, and there's dissociation is the first one, which is what most people are locked into. He said sometimes people slip from dissociation into depression, which is you're now, rather than not feeling your pain, distracting yourself from your pain, you're actually feeling it.
Right.
And it really sucks.
Right.
And so what society is designed to do is when you slip into that depression phase to pull you back into dissociation. He said even most of psychology and especially psychiatry are designed not to actually help you heal your wounds and become enlightened, but to move from depression back a lower stage, which is ignoring your wounds. But why I say this is difficult is if you're someone who's dissociated and you start going down this path of self-knowledge, there's going to be some pain involved. You're going to now feel those wounds that you've been hiding from. And I mean, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, once you get past them, there's greater happiness that can be attained than the like kind of inauthentic, false happiness you have when you're dissociating and kind of living a fake life. But yeah, I mean, I guess you start with self-knowledge. I would say reading books. Going to a therapist is great. The problem with going to a therapist is so many of them suck. I mean, I know in my experience, I've been to several before I found ones that were helpful. And it's like, I mean, it's a very small sample size. So, but I went to probably 4 or 5 in my life for various reasons. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe one of them was good, So I don't know if that's typical, but my guess, talking to other people, it seems like it's less than 50%. So as far as, having success. So I think a therapist is great, but how you find one that's going to work for you, I mean, I guess there's always references and figuring out, talking to friends that have maybe had success, and just not, if you fail at the first one, don't feel like, okay, therapy sucks. Maybe right. Just shop around a little bit, go into it saying, this is, almost like dating, I'm not going to marry the first girl I date. So but we're going to try this out and see, is this a good fit? And if it's not, no sweat. I'll just keep going down the line.
Right. Right.
So, there's finding good self-knowledge tactics. I know journaling is one that works really well. So there are a lot of different ways to journal. There's a lot of journaling exercises. I know, we're both good friends with Wes Bertrand, and he's talked a lot about Nathaniel Branden and even read some of his books on the shows. And Nathaniel Branden has excellent journaling exercises like sentence completion exercises. And I know those, you can get them from Wes's site, his happiness counseling site. Those are really, really good. Yep. I'm a big fan of, it's called interfamily systems therapy. Yep. So I've had on Jay Early to talk about that on my podcast, and he's written the book Self Therapy. It's been really effective for me anyway. I've also had on Pete Gerlach, and I'm close friends with Pete. He's also an IFS therapist, and and Stefan Molyneux promotes that for what it's worth. Yeah. So since we're talking about Steph, that's kind of where I found out about IFS, was just Steph was saying that was the form of psychotherapy that he found to be effective, that worked well for him. Yeah. Is that the only way to get there? No. I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways to get there, but it's one that's worked well for me. So I think that's where it starts, is you have to get to happiness, you first have to get comfortable in your own skin, get to know yourself, and start dealing with the trauma, and when you have unpleasant emotions, things like, frustration or sadness or anger, having strategies to figure out how you're going to deal with that to better your life, more of a long-term approach. So like there's so many strategies that are, okay, when you're feeling those, dissociate, be that grab a bottle or something else. But at the same time, you also don't want to just be like negative all the time. So, one of the things I think self-knowledge is really important. One of the things that I've kind of just discovered really in the last year that's just been a total game changer for me, has totally taken it to the next level, is just positive thinking. Right. So I just did a podcast with Anthony Samaroff on that, where we went into that in depth. But there's a lot of great books out there on positive thinking, and And it's something that you could use it to help in all areas of your life. It's like, I remember talking to a previous boss of mine. He said, today there's going to be a lot of things that I'm not going to have any control over that I'm going to encounter. Mm-hmm. He said, but one thing I have full control over is my attitude. Yeah. And if you think about that and just how much difference an attitude can make in your experience, and I don't care what it is you're doing that day. If it's something you love, if you have a good attitude, it's going to be even better. If it's something you hate, you could turn it into a positive experience. Or, attitude is just huge. And, it's easy to just say, well, be positive, but you really, if you're not just a naturally optimistic person, you're going to need some help to get there. So, there's books, there's exercises you can do, and these things will, if you practice them and follow them, they can really increase your happiness.
Oh yeah.
Among other things. And they can increase your just performance, be that your performance at your job, your performance in a sporting event, or your entrepreneurial success. Having the right attitude and having a positive thoughts can really make a huge, huge difference in a very tangible way in your life. I love the quote from Henry Ford. He said, whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, either way, you're right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. And if you think about that, and I found it to be largely true. What this means is you have the control to have the life you want. You just, you have to start believing it and taking control of your thoughts, because it's people's thoughts. Just we're not really taught to control our thoughts. Your mind just kind of goes wherever it wants, and it's not very good at, I guess, getting you to where it is you should be, because it just wants to like play or whatever. Your mind just kind of goes where it goes, and it's some people in like the different like spiritual traditions and meditation and stuff, they call it monkey brain. Right. It's like your brain just wants to go swing from the trees. And,
although
it's really true,
Yeah, I definitely have that, but I imagine that monkeys' actual brains are probably pretty calm, like compared to humans. Like they're not really they're just thinking, okay, whatever is in, they're probably way more in the moment than humans are, because they're just like, whatever, get the food. And it's like, and I was in Bali a few years ago, and there's an area in Ubud that, which is like kind of the spiritual capital of Bali, and they have a monkey forest, and you just walk through. It's a tourist thing. You walk through, and there's monkeys everywhere. And I stood under this tree, and there was a family of monkeys. There was like the mom and the dad, and there was like the little kids. And the kids were playing that, that game King of the Hill, where you get somebody is on the top and keeps everyone else down. They were playing exactly that. I was watching them for like an hour, just play. Like one would get on the top of the tree, and the others would try to get up there, and one would swat them down, and they'd fall all the way to the ground, then they'd run back up. And I'm like, that's their whole day. That's what they're doing. So it's like completely in the moment.
Yeah, that's great.
But just going to what you were saying, one of the things that I was thinking is that people will say, yeah, well, you mentioned this earlier, but I don't want to blame my parents. Like, that's a waste of time. Like, I don't want to sit here and say, oh, look what happened to me as a kid. I, feel sorry for myself. And how do you respond to that? Is that someone that's just not willing to change, or they're just using an excuse? Or because, as we know, like, no matter how you were raised, there were things you have to deal with later. And so I get frustrated when people say that. It's like, it kind of puts you, when you're talking about this stuff, it puts you in a position of like, you're as if you're telling them, look, you need to feel sorry for yourself. You need to like sit there and blame other people.
Right. So I guess the first thing I would do is step back and try to analyze the situation. Is this a situation where this person was not looking for advice and I initiated it and they're not open to it?
Right.
And you're trying to convince them of something. And if so, like, you're wasting your time talking to them, If it's one where they're generally like wanting to improve themselves and they're coming to you with that question, that's a legitimate question, then I'll entertain it. But I think it's important to distinguish that if somebody's not looking for help, absolute waste of time to try to help out somebody who doesn't want it. Yeah. So, but if they are looking for help and they're like, yeah, but isn't that like, what good would come from blaming my parents? And to an extent, I think they're right. Blaming your parents, putting blame on someone is not going to get you anywhere.
Right.
So I think the thing to realize is just that your parents were damaged just like you are. They're probably parenting you very similarly to how they were parented. Mm-hmm. And it's something that, the cycle kind of perpetuates itself. And the only way for real progress is to actually just break that cycle. So is to realize, okay, I'm not just going to take for granted that the way I was raised is the way to do it. I'm not just going to, with no self-awareness, parent, which is how most people do it. Most people don't put a lot of effort into learning about parenting or becoming a better parent. They just think that, oh, this isn't something you need to learn. I know how to parent. My parents did a great job with me. I turned out just fine, right?
Yeah.
So I would just say, look, this isn't about blaming them. I would have compassion for my parents and the wounds they suffered, just like I have compassion for myself and for the wounds I suffered. And just realize, they went through the same thing I went through. And I just somewhere along the way, for whatever reason, I took another path where now I'm wanting to be more aware of these things that happened to me when I was growing up. And I want to learn from them and better myself. And where it gets a little sticky, I guess, is if your parents are still in your life and they're still abusive to you, they're still a very strong negative force in your life.
Right.
Because that makes it a little more difficult. So, one of the best ways to improve your life is to surround yourself with positive people and get rid of the negative people. And if those happen to be your parents or your family, that can become a really big challenge for people, And Kevin Geary is somebody, I did a podcast with him for a while, Reboot Your Kids. He was calling it, you should always keep track of the bank of you, where he said, that you have people in your life, they're either making deposits or they're making withdrawals. And you want to look at what their balance is. And if they're going into the red a lot, if they're depositing a lot more than or if they're withdrawing way more than they're ever depositing, you probably need to close their account.
That's awesome.
And I was like, wow, that's really good. So it's, if you have people around you that are really adding value to your life, that are helping you to reach your goals, that are helping you to be happy, that's going to be optimal. And it's going to be really, really hard to improve. If you're somebody you're really dissatisfied with your life and you're surrounded by people that are just keeping that going. Yeah. It's going to be really, really hard.
Right.
It's, I liken it to like speaking a new language, this changing your thoughts to be positive. Well, you could sit there and read a book about how to speak Japanese, but if all day long, all you're doing is speaking English with people, it's going to be really hard to become fluent in Japanese. You're basically not, it's not going to happen. You're not going to become fluent in Japanese by reading a book on Japanese and then speaking English all day long. Right. So at some point you're going to have to start speaking Japanese if you want to become fluent in it. Yeah. And you're going to need somebody else that can understands Japanese, Yeah. So it's, like I said, that's the sticky point, is if your parents are in your life, and this is where these defense mechanisms that will fire up that keep people from progressing. And it's how culture has programmed us to not go down these paths. Like it's, okay, well, if I don't honor my father and mother, then I'm a sinner and I'm going to hell, and maybe you're not having that conscious thought, but at a subconscious level, that's been programmed into you. And there's something that's firing off whenever any kind of questioning of the parents, or, oh, your parents maybe weren't the best parents ever. Maybe there was actually some damage done to you that, these at a subconscious level, it knows all of these things that society's taught us, that religion and culture and everything, that, just respect your elders, rather than just respect everyone or give respect where it's earned. It's respect your elders, right?
Yeah.
So these defenses fire off because we've been programmed this way, essentially. So it's you really have to take over your program. Say, you know what? I don't want to just be the person that society programmed me to be. I want to choose who I want to be. How society has kind of programmed us
right,
to not go down these paths with things like, honor your father and mother, respect your elders, and the like.
Yeah.
So you had heard that?
Yep. Yeah, got that.
Okay. So society has programmed us to be one way. We have to not be aware of ourselves, to not have this self-knowledge, to not question authority, honor thy father and mother, respect your elders, etc., and to dissociate away from any kind of exploration of the inner self, right?
Yeah.
And the question is it's like, okay, do I want to be the person that society has programmed me to be? Or do I want to be the person, do I want to choose who I want to be? And if you are going to choose who you want to be, it's going to require some reprogramming because you're going to have these things that fire off inside of you, this programming that's been written in since literally day one by your family, by your church, by your society around you.
Yep. To
think in certain ways. So that's what these positive thinking exercises, what a lot of the self-awareness and things like that are designed to do is to help you to reprogram yourself so that you have control over that. You really do. You have control over your thoughts in your mind, but it takes work to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I want to get to the Harry Brown stuff, but just to continue on this, one thing that I was listening to Brett's podcast, The School Sucks, the last few episodes he did with Wes Bertrand and Matt Amerson. And they talked about this internal family systems and how they went through the ACE scores, and it was really interesting. I got a lot out of hearing it. And one thing that came up is, one of the things I would like to do on this podcast is I talk about entrepreneurship, and then I talk about, being free within your own life. So it's kind of two different things, but they're very related. And people look up to entrepreneurs that have been really successful, and for good reason. But I know a lot of entrepreneurs here in San Diego that, they are extremely on paper and from all the looks of things, extremely successful, making a lot of money. And, they're on stage, they're doing all kinds of things that most people would say, wow, look at that guy. He's killing it. He's so successful. And yet their personal lives are a complete mess. They're alcoholics. They're addicted to drugs. They've got all these other issues. So I see that what needs to happen is, it's great to go into this entrepreneur realm because, that's where you can really use your autonomy and independence. But at the same time, I think this stuff needs to happen as well because, okay, let's say you make $1 billion, but everything in your life is a mess and you can afford to have all these things and go to these great places, but your relationships are unfulfilling and, other things are happening that aren't leading to a happy life. So I see the need to kind of put these things together, like great, become an entrepreneur, do your own thing, but and don't listen to what other people are saying and all that good stuff. But also don't just accept everything else in society. Don't just, go along with things and think that, this is what's going to make me happy.
Yeah, it's funny. To this day, if I'm asked the question, what's the one book you would recommend to other people? It still would probably be Harry Brown, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. It's just such a powerful book and really, really eye-opening if you've not been exposed to these ideas before, and just such a brilliant work, and it's kind of like your show. It's kind of the underlying theme to mine as well, just maybe with a slightly different flavor. Yours is butter pecan and mine's, chocolate banana or something, but they're both still ice cream. They're both still based kind of off of, the Harry Brown, but it's not everything. It's like, well, I really can't just give you one book, because it's not, one book isn't going to get you there. The inner world isn't really covered there. Now he's got some things that are good. Like you did that podcast recently on the burning issues trap.
Yeah.
Which is kind of it's like rubbing up against the areas that we're talking about, but it's not exactly there.
Right.
But what's missing from that is, I think, really loving yourself, and really being comfortable with yourself and being, I remember Brett, you mentioned Brett Venant, one of his podcasts, he said, he tells a story of how he was waiting in an office somewhere and he had to wait for like an hour or something and his battery died on his phone.
Yeah.
And he was like, holy shit, I'm uncomfortable as hell right now.
Right.
How sad is that?
Yeah.
And to his credit, he went and explored that and said, this isn't right. I should be comfortable in my own skin just sitting here. He went and explored that and did a lot of work. And now I think he relishes time when he's unplugged, and I know I'm the same way. And now it's like, my God, to sit there and just be able to meditate for an hour, that would be awesome. Or to do some interfamily systems therapy while I'm sitting in the office. I would love that. I'm totally comfortable in my own skin and I really like myself and spending time with myself.
Yeah, and there's something I wanted to mention here. Brett had on when they were talking about this stuff. They mentioned there was something in one of the reports that was talking about how some people can just completely dissociate through work. They can be insanely productive and get so much done, but their whole purpose is they're trying to distract themselves. And so that leads to what I was saying is they're super productive. They're getting all kinds of stuff done, but at what cost? They haven't dealt with all these things that we're talking about. And I find that really interesting because there is a balance. And you look at Elon Musk and he works 120 hours a week. everybody thinks Elon Musk is like just the most amazing human being on the planet. It seems like when you read articles and blog posts and things. But at what cost? He has 5 kids. How is he spending enough? Like, there's something missing there. And I'm glad that he's doing what he's doing. But at the same time, if people are looking up to that and want to do that, a lot of times it's at a pretty great cost to their lives, right?
Yeah, and I guess that's the only way to get around that is to not dissociate. Is you have to dive in to those wounds, and heal them, and it's an ongoing process. It's I don't mean to sound like I've arrived, I'm at the peak of enlightenment or anything, my goal is to just be a little more healed, a little more healthy tomorrow than I am today, just to kind of keep that trend going upward,
Right.
A little more happy today than I was yesterday, and just keep working towards that. And I don't think pouring yourself into work is the answer. That's going to do that. You're not getting a lot of your needs met if you're spending 120 hours a week working. You're just not. There's a whole range of things, including you mentioned the children, relationships. This is an area that's a source of unhappiness for a lot of people. Most people's their relationships suck, or they're very unfulfilling. At best, they're maybe not that fulfilling. Well,
right.
Quite often they're worse than that. They're a negative in their life, their relationships. Clearly he's not giving his kids what they need, let alone getting what he needs in return, if he's spending all this time working. So, yeah. So, I mean, there's no way around doing that hard work and digging in and spending time on self-knowledge. And I guess it's hard for people to put aside the time, because everybody's locked into their routines and all that stuff. And it doesn't sound all that pleasant. It's like, well, Chris, you're telling me that the first stage is going to be depression if I get that doesn't sound, but my guess is if you're listening to this, you're probably not, you're probably more past that dissociation phase anyway, or else you wouldn't even be listening to this. You'd be off watching football or drinking beers or something. But, the thing is, it's like, if it's okay, if there's one activity I could do that would increase my long-term happiness, improve my relationships, improve my health, would increase my ability to be successful, in my career or in other areas of my life. Wouldn't you do that?
Right.
It's like, okay, a lot of people listening to this have probably work out a few times a week, or probably are health conscious or whatever. I mean, I know you did the health podcast. What was it? A Healthy Mind, Fit Body.
Right.
So any people that crossed over from that show to your current one, well, another way, tremendous way to improve your health is to lower your stress and have more happiness in your life, smile more, laugh more. And one way to get there is to, work on yourself, like do on these things we've been talking about. So that's going to have a huge impact on your life. So, I guess if you've only got 3 hours a week to dedicate towards health, maybe you start splitting that up and maybe give half of that to, working on your inner health, your mental health and the like, or you could even combine them by depending on what you're doing. So like, I mean, I know there are some practices I can do while I'm walking, where I'm killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So that's what I would say. The end goal is happiness. It's not making $1 billion. If you made $1 billion and you're not happy, then who cares?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and you were talking about like the shortcomings of how I found freedom in an unfree world, which I think that's an important topic because, this is what I base my show on. It's what I talk about all the time. I'm the same way. It's like, if there's only one book, what would you read? And I always say, it's got to be this one, How I Found Freedom. But it does have, it's not everything. You can't have everything in one place. I think there's a lot more that people need. And I think what's missing is a lot of what you were saying, but also just this idea that the whole Buddhist philosophy of kind of just being in the now is something that I think I did not get out of that book. And
oh yeah,
and I had a lot of things figured out after. Well, I read the book twice, and I did all sorts of Nathaniel Branden exercises and written sentence completions and all that. And I came a long way in just a few months. But How I Found Freedom, although it opened my eyes to realizing how much more control I had over my own life, which I think that was the kind of overall what I got out of it, it also, it was lacking because I still had some anxiety going on. And it took me a while to figure out what was really happening. And what it really was is like, it's not accepting, instead of accepting what's just right in front of me, saying, okay, this is the reality of what I'm dealing with, I was not accepting that, and I was rejecting things that I don't like. I reject them. And it seems logical. You just reject everything you don't like and you accept the things you like, but it doesn't work because you're not dealing with the emotion that's part of that, like whatever it is, if it's frustration or anger, or you're just kind of going, nope, I refuse to acknowledge this anger, even though it's there. So I found this out only like a couple of years, not even like a year and a half ago. I found that I was doing this and it was creating a lot of anxiety. And so I think that was the big supplement for me. I went to a therapist and she recommended a book called Get Out of Your Head and Into Your Life. And that book was amazing. So that was for psychology. Besides Nathaniel Branden, that's my go-to book, and it's got a lot of written exercises. And it's based on this thing called acceptance and commitment therapy, which really goes along with what I'm saying is just accepting whatever that is. If it's a feeling, like accepting that you're upset or you're sad or whatever, is so it's every part of life. It just makes it so much better. And it took me a few months to kind of really get this into my head where it's like that I'm not accepting these things, and then getting to the point where I am accepting them and just feeling that anxiety just kind of slowly go down further and further, and to the point where, okay, now this makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, no, two really, really great points there. I'll start with the last one first, which is acceptance. I know I've started to where almost daily I say the serenity prayer. I mean, I'm an atheist, so I'm not really praying to a deity. This is more just a positive thinking thing, or a control of my own thoughts thing. Because I found that so many times I would have some anxiety or frustration over something that all I was just not accepting what was there. I'm like, there's nothing that can be done about that. It's already gone. Like maybe, I just moved, whenever you have some real estate transactions, if you're moving from selling one house and buying another, every little thing is not going to go right along the way. You know what I mean? There's going to be a couple bumps in the road, you know what I mean? Yep. And I would be like getting hung up, being like, just like letting that ruin my day, that something happened that, didn't go right. And I'm like, you know what? There's nothing I can do about that. It's done. It's over. So why let that keep, it sucked, but it sucks worse that I'm allowing it to keep ruining my day even more, Right. Why let it have that power over me when it doesn't. I'm giving it that power. I'm giving away my power to choose how I want this day to be. Yeah. So that a lot of it is just remembering, and it's so funny. Like I'm at the point now where I'm pretty much saying it every day, because I'll find myself like in this point where I'm not accepting something. I'm like, oh, time for the prayer, and I guess for those who haven't heard it, it's God. I just say, God, may I have the serenity to accept that which I cannot change, the courage to change what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. But I don't say it quite like that because I'm an atheist, but but that's so funny that it's just, whenever I do that, when I'm like stressing out over something that I can't change, I fail myself just immediately get calm. Yeah. And like a lot of times by the end of it, I'm smiling and be like, yep, you know what? I can't control that, but what I can control is how I feel right now. And you know what? I've got a pretty good life. Yeah. And I'm going to think about that, Yeah.
I was just, it's funny. I was just telling my girlfriend last night, I was like, I had a really good day yesterday. There were some things in my business that weren't going so well. And yesterday it was a bright spot. There are things, some things were working really well that hadn't been working. And then at the end of the day, this thing happened, and I just got obsessed over it. I'm like, it's just something to do with the mail. Like I mailed this check and it didn't arrive. And I'm like, that's all I could focus on. Like for like 2 hours, I'm just sitting there going, I can't believe they didn't get the check, And I'm like, all of the good was negated by this one thing that was negative. And then I'm like, this is just where I gotta like realize I gotta let this go. It's gonna resolve itself. But those type of things, definitely are really big.
Yeah. And of course, the other thing you mentioned was just being the presence, being focused, and that's such a huge one. It's a way to really enjoy life, is to come in so many ways. Just eating food, I found, like, rather than listening to a podcast or watching TV or whatever, just sitting there, okay, there's nothing else on, and I'm just sitting here with my food, and I've got my focus, my thoughts are on this food, and the flavor that comes out in the food, it's like 1,000 times more flavorful when you put your focus on it. I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, this food kicks ass, and I'm like, what a great experience this is, and I'm like, and so many things like that. Or, in relationships, a lot of why relationships are unfulfilling is people are in their head rather than actually experiencing their partner, It's just so much of the the lack of success in the different areas of your life can really come down to just not being present. It's amazing. Once you start becoming aware of it and trying to work on it, you're like, oh my God, I had no idea this was this powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you want to add anything else to as far as the how I found freedom and kind of what's lacking there? Or?
No, I mean, I think we covered it. I mean, it's an introductory book. You know, you have that, and then it's gonna blow your mind and spend a lot of time thinking about it. But you just have to keep reading from there. You know, there's all kinds of books in all different areas, and some of them are things like this, like improving your life, you know, through positive thinking and self-awareness. And some of it is just increasing your knowledge, you know, knowing what is the right thing to do, like nutrition, you know, right. It's like, okay, sometimes you just need to have knowledge and look at what the latest studies say and things of that nature to help you make more informed decisions. And fortunately, I love reading. And so that's not a problem for me. It's one of the things that rather than watching sports, I'd much rather read a book. So so just keep reading. And I guess for your listeners, again, the best way to find me is if you just Google Choice Conversations, the first like 5 links are probably going to be me. So that would be great.
Yeah, and your podcast has so many interesting topics. I just was going through all the different shows, and you know, everything from the stuff we're talking about here to anarchy to artificial intelligence, and it's just the topics are just fascinating. So I really appreciate you doing that show, Chris, and it's been great chatting here, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, no, definitely. I talked too much this time. Next time I'm going to turn it around on you and hear more about Kevin Koskela.
No worries. I was on your show and I got to talk a lot there, so it's all good. It's all good.
Take care of yourself.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Freedom Lovin' Podcast. To break free today, head on over to freedomlovin.com and download our free guide. 7 practical tips to living free in an unfree world.